it forces everyone into the conversation about African slavery. How did it evolve? Why did it evolve? And then how did it keep going? Um, so that conversation is not going well. I would bluntly say. The university I work with right now has been very, very supportive of the historians just being blunt and teaching the material. We go into the hard questions, the consistent racism issues, not just with African Americans, but Native Americans, with other immigrant groups. Dealing with these are problems that we've had consistent issues with. We have never fully resolved them, and sometimes we seem to go backwards and forwards. Right now, we're seeing where some states are becoming more restrictive on what you can teach. And having been a high school teacher at one time, I would not have done well with somebody telling me, I need to see your books, and I need to vet your books. I said, excuse me, I can vet you. I says, I don't take advice from the librarian on what books are history, in my collection. I am not going to take advice from you on that one. I'm pretty arrogant about that one. I spent too much time on this, over 40 years of the study. However, to be told that, well, you're going to have to tone down to discuss slavery. You're going to have to not bring up, or you've got to take more time on Henry Clay, and they kind of ignore Harriet Tubman, and just mention Douglass here, but don't talk about him in the 1880s. It says no. I know the field, and to be told because of political sensibilities that you cannot teach certain things at a certain level, I'm opposed to that. But that is what we've got. We're seeing it. It's many times I see activists argue that, well, perhaps we're just trying to keep. We don't want kids to hate them. Be told to hate themselves. As no one is telling kids to hate themselves. But you look at the issue and you have a mixed race, and I have it in some of my classrooms, and I just relish the moment where I can bring them in. Okay, what do you feel about this? Now, many of my kids who are African American, they grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood, so they have not had any personal emotional experience with racism. My good friend of mine, Fran Brown, was very, her dad was an admiral, in the U.S. Navy. He didn't experience racism because, Fran's dad was in charge. Everybody looked at him. They said, "Yes, sir. No, sir." How far, sir? She had known. She was wealthy her whole life. She didn't have the baggage. Her husband does. He had the baggage. He had the baggage to deal with. So there were these issues that they felt differently. It depends on the personal experiences are important, because it may be that's an emotional. I teach Sunday school, and I teach Sunday school in the Near East Side, Indianapolis, and some of my students have dealt with racism at a really horrible level, but they're poor. They're fairly vulnerable in parts of their lives, and so they have suffered. And they have baggage. Trust me, they have baggage.
Yeah, absolutely. All of us were carried the baggage. But anyway, I was probably this is the last one I'll ask you here before we are moving towards the conclusion. Now, is it? I know we're always going to go back to what we were always discussing before. In that, in the United States, there are people who believe that they are the real people. Every other person is just
Yes.
subordinate. That is why they fit our history in that way. Because if we were to take up Christopher Columbus, I don't think you are saying this is the only thing you can talk about him. You don't need to talk this about him. You don't need to study these years about him. We entirely look at a human being and try to see everything we can learn from him.
Mm-hmm.
If we take out Shakespeare is not even an American. In the United States, I don't think you are studying just maybe 30 years in the life of Shakespeare. You are looking at him as a human being and what he has done. If you think of, I don't know, maybe a Roman emperor, you don't say you are just going to study only this small part of him. You look at him
Hmm.
from when he was a child till he grew up, what he did, because you are trying to find traces of what can you learn from him. So I believe that in the same vein, those in charge of the United States should be open to a real conversation. That we really sincerely want to solve the problem of genocide that have been committed in this country. Not pretending it is okay. What I mean is that when you are open for conversation, you can't say let's talk and you are blocking me. You must allow me to talk. Ask me, how do I feel? I
Hmm.
also want to know how you feel. Because if you are blocking me, you're also blocking my feeling. How can you block my feeling and you want us to reconcile? Reconcile what? So is it because those in charge of the United States, because that is what we are talking about today,
Right.
are still believing that there are some people who are the real Americans? Every other person is irrelevant, that they are featuring the history like this. For this reason, people like Frederick Douglass are not known in the society that they have fought to build. Help me with that.
Ooh, let's see. How am I going to start with that one? Um, I would say political leaders are by and large not a courageous bunch. Having worked with some politicians in my time and being horrified that they're not all that bright and they're certainly not courageous. And if they're career politicians, they want to maintain that status. So they're not really inclined to challenge their constituents. A little like a pastor who pastors a very conservative nationalist church. He can't say, or she can't say things that are going to offend the congregation because they'll get fired. And I think that's the attitude we've got. We don't want to tick off their constituents. Americans, many Americans, many Americans, when you think of history, go through it with blinders. They see a very limited perspective. And we've done it for quite some time. Our use of social media has only exaggerated that tendency. Um, the old party system we've had for generations has always encouraged that blinkered, limited perspective. And so you really aren't able, it's hard to talk because you have to leave that blinkeredness and talk with somebody who is not like you. I remember having one conversation like that where it had to change me because I asked, how do you feel about this? And I got told, which was healthy because I had to rethink a lot of what I assumed. But I had learned to respect this person because I knew their education background. I knew that they knew things. I knew they were smart and were wise. And that at root, we had the same faith base. And that so I had to really listen to what this person said, even though it was not what I had expected. And then I had to rethink my own positions on quite a number of issues because of this deep conversation. That is a conversation most don't have. And politicians are not inclined, I mean, they may have it themselves, but like I said, politicians are not courageous beings.